Let's go. Let's go. Today is an incredibly big day. It's October 1st, 2025. And believe it or not, we are living in, I feel like, the beginning of a Charles Dickens novel. Yes, it is the best of times. It is the worst of times. So let me key this up for you for today. As you know, we have a special guest joining us at 9:15, Adam Klasfeld. And Adam Klasfeld is an amazing court reporter, now editor of his own newsletter called All Rise News. And again, he is joining us at 9:15 to break down the legal news of the day or the legal news of our lifetime. This is that a federal judge once again has slapped back Donald Trump in an amazingly beautiful, extremely lengthy, I think it's 161-page decision. We will get to that. But first, my friends, this is how most of us should be feeling this morning. Let me share this with you. What you are seeing here is the face of U.S. military generals, hundreds of them, who were called to the United States from their posts all around the world, supposedly to hear some kind of pep talk from Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, who has declared himself Secretary of War, even though his official title, for which he was confirmed after a Senate hearing, his official title, according to Congress, is Secretary of Defense. But no, he was calling in these folks to beat his chest and cosplay a warrior. And if that was all it was, that would have been bad enough. But after Hegseth made a fool of himself, Donald Trump said, "Hold my beer," or in this case, whatever meds he is on. So I need to break down for you why yesterday morning was utterly terrifying, but entirely predictable. As we have said before, we have a dictatorship. This is authoritarianism. Now what? I have been saying that to you since the beginning of the second Trump term. And my answer to you 100% of the time is don't sugarcoat it. We need to look this right in the face, and we need to act in ways where we have power. And as you know, there is an event coming up October 18th, another No King's Day protest. Please look into that. You know, we just had Leah Greenberg, co-founder of Indivisible, on, and we have also had Ezra Levin, not to be confused with Ezra Klein, the other co-founder of Indivisible, telling us how important it is for us to show nonviolent resistance. More on that in a moment. Now, let me start with, just to lighten it up, not actually Pete Hegseth, but let's start with comedian Trey Crowder mocking Pete Hegseth. Trey is fabulous and funny, and I think you're going to get the drift just by listening. Let's go.
Hey, y'all. Apparently, Pete Hegseth had a big idea recently. I guess he was in his office one day, fueling a manic episode with shots of Fireball, ranting at his assistant, like, all right, you got everything squared away for the official Pentagon beer pong tournament next week? All right, hell yeah. Okay, next order of business, I need you to draft a memo to military leadership. Tell them they all got to come here on the 30th for a meeting. Yes, sir. And what should I say is the purpose of this unprecedented and obviously vitally important meeting? So I could talk mad shit and get everybody fucking hyped, bro. That's what. Don't tell them that, though. I want it to be a surprise. Yeah, I'm going to go Def Jam on these bitches. That's what. Don't say I said that. Sounded super black. I don't know why I said it. It's going to be sweet as fuck. Put that in the memo. Say attendance is mandatory, but it will be sweet as fuck, though. Signed, Hegs Dog. Right? He was clearly very into it. He had the American flag behind him, and it seemed like old General patting himself on the back must have hit a gas mask bong filled with his own farts before he got up there, because he was feeling himself, boy. He's like, all right, first things first, kick ass and rip shit. That's what we do. And starting today, we're going old school, okay? I don't want to hear any more of that woke ass, oh, the Geneva Convention, oh, civilian casualties. Bullshit, all right? Rules of engagement, more like rules of engage shit. War crimes, give me more crimes. That's what I say. America, motherfucker, lighting shit up since 1776, bitch. Also, no more fatties. That's right. Starting today, we're all going to be ripped as hell. We're all going to train MMA, and we're going to paint flames in all the fucking tanks. It's going to be sick, all right? We're going to have tight-ass haircuts. Everybody's got a clean-shaven jawline, and no, that's not because I can't grow a good beard. I do not want it reported that that last thing is because I can't grow a good beard. Also, women in the military. I know, right? But unfortunately, there's more to war than just rocking hard and blowing shit up, okay? So we can let the ladies handle some of that. But gals, here's the deal. Gonna need you to zip it up a bit. Okay, apparently you've been reporting more and more sexual assaults every year, and straight up, you're harshing the fucking vibes, all right? It's not cool. Okay, maybe try smiling a little more. See how much further that gets you. All right, that's about it for me. Just a couple more quick things. We're going to start giving out medals for hazing. We're going to do that old-timey thing where you play live music when the battle starts, but instead of dumb trumpets, we're going to shred guitar. And, oh yeah, we're going to rename all the forts after slave owners again. All right, Hegs Dog out. Right, then to cap off the cartoonish lunacy of it all, once he got done fat-shaming military leadership, he brought on stage the dumpiest commander-in-chief since Taft was getting wedged into bathtubs. The whole thing was a completely unnecessary clown show embarrassment, or as Team Trump calls it, our wheelhouse. Right, but luckily you could tell that all the generals there weren't very happy about it either, presumably because they've dedicated their lives to serving with distinction in a role they take very seriously, and then today they had to sit quietly while the most unserious administration in the history of the Western world called them all fat gay losers as part of an impotent attempt to project a weak idiot's idea of strength. Ain't that America?
So I'm sure that no one said it better than Trey. You know, he was doing it direct to camera in his car. That is how clever he is. Now, no joke. Let me show you that picture again of the generals. Look at them. Now, I know in this photo, this is a photo by Doug Mills of the New York Times, that, you know, there is something, I mean, you can see their heads and their faces, but not the details, right? So in a way, I'm sure Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth on stage saw them as, or at least Donald Trump, his little warriors on some board game that he is playing. But these men and women there are human beings who worked hard to rise up in the ranks of our armed forces. And they have seen far more of this world in terms of managing people and their behavior, whether normal or psychotic, and in terms of war. And so now I know I started out with us laughing at what happened yesterday, but I'm afraid now I need to show you some clips, the real deal of what went down. So let me start first with Pete Hegseth, who is utterly barbaric. Pete Hegseth, who basically announced a confession if he has ever tried for war crimes at The Hague, because he has announced or commanded to our top military brass that they don't have to follow the rules of engagement, the laws of armed conflict. Now, I know it sounds crazy that wars have rules, because you would think if we could follow rules, we wouldn't have to go out and fight. But the reality is sometimes nations are under attack. Sometimes there is violence. We see it everywhere in the world. And, you know, look at Ukraine. What were they going to do? Roll over and play dead? They needed to fight back. Now, Hegseth announces that we don't have to follow the rules of, you know, the rules of engagement. Let's listen to him right here.
We are preparing every day. We have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. Defense is something you do all the time. It's inherently reactionary and can lead to overuse, overreach, and mission creep. War is something you do sparingly, on our own terms, and with clear aims. We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
What is he talking about here? Let's be explicit. He is talking about killing civilians, deciding if, I mean, this is what we're talking about. Bombing cities. Think about the photograph of that young child who grew to be an adult woman running with her back burning from in the Vietnam War from napalm. I think that photo was. Think about that. Pete Hegseth was someone who was encouraging one of his friends who was involved in war crimes to be exonerated for that. This is not what our troops want. Moreover, Pete Hegseth also announced that they were no longer going to accept in the U.S. military anonymous complaints. What does that mean? That means if someone who is in your troop notices that you're doing things like harming civilians or sexually harassing coworkers or raping women in villages or whatever that you are doing that is inexcusable, unless they're willing to go forward and put their name on it, he won't accept those complaints, not at all. What does that tell you? Furthermore, he also talked about domestic violence. Let's not let that hold back men's careers. There's more, though. As Trey Crowder pointed out, Pete gets up there, and he did serve a little bit of time, as we've talked about in the reserves. But okay, he gets up there in a tight-fitting suit and his slick back hair with very little combat experience, and starts insulting these generals, telling them that they are not physically fit for their jobs, suggesting that no one can be quote unquote fat. And I am not here to body shame or fat shame. And at the same time, did he look over to his commander in chief? Because I guess there are two sets of rules, just like the dual state that we talked about. Donald Trump gets to be overweight. Donald Trump gets to be a criminal. Donald Trump gets to be an adjudicated sexual assaulter. All of it. But everybody else has to follow the rules he does not follow. Okay. Not only that, Hegseth, he says a lot of contradictory, sort of delusional things like, if you are a Department of Defense, you'll overreach. I think he's talking about peacekeeping. He actually thinks that the whole purpose of war, of a military, is to go in, kill a bunch of people, and get people to surrender. Does he even understand how NATO works? What if one of our allies is being attacked? You're supposed to go in and make who surrender? Our ally? Or you're just trying to get to defend our ally against an intruder? It's not possible. It's not possible. Is he suggesting that our role in the war that Russia waged against Ukraine should be surrender of Vladimir Putin? That's not what he's talking about, but he acts like it is. What he's actually saying is we shouldn't be nice to people. We should go in and kill a bunch of people, and that's how the world works. He's a sick fuck, basically. Now, I need you to listen to this barbaric language and insulting ways he talks about the officers in our military. Listen to this.
A few months ago, I was at the White House when President Trump announced his Liberation Day for America's trade policy. It was a landmark day. Well, today is another Liberation Day. The liberation of America's warriors, in name, in deed, and in authorities. You kill people and break things for a living. You are not politically correct and don't necessarily belong always in polite society.
What an insult. It's like he's saying, you're our assassins. You don't belong in polite society. What an utter insult to people who've built their life on believing that their role is to defend our borders, to defend our freedom, to defend us against lunatics. Now, we are the lunatics, or not you and me, but Donald Trump. I see Adam is here in the green room, but I just want to show you two quick clips before I introduce him and bring him up on stage. Okay. The most frightening thing that Donald Trump did yesterday is announce once again that he considers Democratic cities to be enemies. He's talked about the enemy within. Now he has knitted this together with his new Department of War nomenclature to suggest that our cities that are led by Democratic mayors should be the training ground for Pete Hegseth's lethality plans. Let me play that for you.
Important mission, and I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor, stupid governor, stupid. They threw him out of his family business. He was so stupid. I know the family. He becomes governor. He's got money. Not money that he made, but he ran for governor, he won, and now he criticizes us all the time.
Yeah, this goes on and on. Now, I know I warned you that this was a scary speech, but the man is barely alive as he mumbles, because some of the time Donald Trump was saying scary shit, but some of the time he was batshit crazy. I'm going to save one of those things for Crazy Town, but let me share the last thing before I bring up Adam.
Ones that are run by the radical left Democrats, what they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within. Controlling the physical territory of our border is essential to national security.
Yeah, Donald Trump looked out at hundreds of military leaders and declared a war on American soil. Usually a civil war isn't started by the president, but these times are different. Okay, let me introduce you to Adam Klasfeld. Adam is, as I said, editor-in-chief and owner of All Rise News. You should subscribe via Substack. I'm sure there is a free way of doing this, and there's also a way you can pay. And Adam just had a story this last night on his Substacks announcing as follows: Judge sounds alarm in ruling denouncing Trump's targeting student protesters. I want to share with you from that ruling. Actually, I'll bring Adam up and let him walk us through it. I've got a few slides that he can narrate for us. I have to tell you, I'm super excited to see Adam. He isn't just someone whose work I follow online, but I actually met him once in the hallway of a courtroom in the Southern District of New York. And I have not seen him since then. Okay. Welcome, Adam. Hey.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's been a while, Jen. Great to see you again.
It is great to see you. Hey, what is going on in your background? Is that a plant on the wall over your left shoulder?
Over my left shoulder, that is a cuckoo clock.
Oh my God. Is it going to go off during the show, Adam?
Oh, it is currently disabled. So the cuckoo is ensconced safely into the tree. But it's a work of art. It's a cuckoo clock. And got it in neighborhood where I live. So it's a
I love that.
Comforting thing in the background there.
I think it's a metaphor for something. That cuckoo clock, you have to turn it off because otherwise it would be sounding at all times. Okay.
Right. And considering that this is my streaming spot, it needs to be off quite frequently, but it can be a kind of talking piece at parties.
Wonderful. At the end, I'm going to ask you where people can find you because I think you're everywhere. But let's begin. First, do you want to comment before we get into the specifically legal news? Do you want to comment first on what went down yesterday at Quantico?
You know, it's I think you said it all, Jen. There's been so much reporting about that the fact that folks who were in that room have been speaking off the record to the New York Times, and with an administration that's this vengeful, right? You know, they're going to try to find anyone who commented privately in an anonymous way, and that they were that frustrated that the New York Times, for example, was able to get a comment like that. Also says it all. That this
So
is.
tell us more about that. Not everybody on the show is on the East Coast and they haven't read their news yet, or they're just avoiding the news. Tell us about the off the record comments.
So I don't know what was exactly off the top of my head, but essentially the high ranking figures in that room felt that this was an outrage, essentially, that
Right.
this was that they were being pulled across oceans to get a kind of macho pep talk, being lectured about their, and so again, this isn't a direct quotation, but I mean, you said it before I entered this chat. This was a speech about how everyone should honor certain fitness standard, and here comes the president of the United States, who does not embody any of those fitness standards, and is philosophically opposed to exercise. He has this kind of crazy idea that exercise depletes your life force. And here's Pete Hegseth, playing at these ideas. And, I think it's just one of a series of, as you said earlier, cosplay.
So can I just jump? I love that you were saying this, and again, we'll turn to the legal news in a second, but I thought that the reason why they needed to bring them all together, I didn't think it was just optics. I thought they're going to have a private conversation, because that's why you put people in a room, right? Where no one can record things, where you're face to face and you can say stuff off the record. But when I found out that the whole meeting was televised, I mean, this could have been a Zoom.
Right.
That a Zoom doesn't give you the photograph or the physical and mental control of being able to call in the military on a whim. This is a total power play. I'm trying to avoid profanity, but I could say I could use a lot of profanity here. Okay.
Well,
So
we've been seeing a lot of, I mean, there have been stunts that, just look at what's happening in Portland, right? I covered, if we to kind of bridge the gap to the conversations between this and legal news, I covered the Posse Comitatus trial in California. And what came out in that trial was that for all of Trump's boast of this is going to be a big crime fighting force, we're going to take on American cities, that these are going to be training grounds, he said yesterday, training grounds. Well, what actually was going on the ground in Los Angeles? This crime fighting force was instructed by professional chain of command that no, they cannot engage in civilian law enforcement because there's a law of the land called the Posse Comitatus Act. And so how many people over the months of occupation in California were detained by law enforcement? 2. They came up with some excuses for why they believed that was permissible. One time there was a veteran going to get services at a VA property, federal property. Local law enforcement wasn't around, and they said they were just they were standing by until civilian law enforcement could come. But the judge found that they violated the Posse Comitatus Act because they were directing traffic and doing crowd control, the sort of things that fall under the rubric of civilian law enforcement. So, I think there's a connection between these two things. It's Trump trying to project this image of we're going to make U.S. cities training grounds. But what is actually happening here? A professional military that has been instructed on the law and the Constitution is knowing, they know, and they're being instructed on
their limits, on the limits of engagement,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, the rules of engagement, what they can and cannot do. Now, are those being corrupted? Yes, and that's why a federal judge in California found that they were in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act because, and again, this general, the main witness for both the state of California and the federal government testified that he was given an interpretation of the Posse Comitatus Act to make it more permissive. And that interpretation from on high that he said all the way to the top of the Department of Defense, he didn't say Hegseth, but clearly Hegseth, that interpretation was an illegal interpretation. So that is
But let me just say, so and you know me, just like you, I believe in the rule of law. I think, thank God, many of the courts are holding firm. That said, my fear, and I'm sure it is with you too, is a kind of mission creep. Because even if all these, federalized National Guards are placed in cities and they're not allowed to do anything other than to watch over and make sure no one beats up a masked ICE agent, even if that's all they're doing, if they are present at critical times, such as during midterm elections or really any time, they may cross the line. Some of them might, and try to invoke violence. And even if what they do is quote unquote illegal, if they've shut down polling places, et cetera, there's not really a mechanism to redo the election in those circumstances. And I'm not trying to freak people out. I'm just trying to point out that we cannot have them get comfortable in our cities. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, I mean, even without going to the nightmare scenarios, which we should imagine, we should prepare for that. You mentioned the election. The Pentagon and Trump have extended the LA troop deployment through November, past this upcoming election. And one can very easily and appropriately argue that the very presence of troops on the ground has this effect of frightening the civilian population. The fact that the troops are on our streets, the fact that Trump lies that they're acting in the kind of crime fighting force, that they are going to straighten out the streets, and of a war ravaged, his words, American city that is experiencing peaceful protests, that the combination of the image. So I try to make a concerted effort to distinguish two things. One, none of this is normal. It's all alarming. But on the other hand, I don't want people, I think Trump wants to create this image that there are no limits, resistance is futile, that there is no lawful means to push back through civic engagement, through the courts, and that everything he says about bringing the troops onto the streets as a crime-fighting force, that they're his personal props and his personal crime-fighting force, that's to really carefully distinguish the stuff that he's saying about his power and what his power actually is, because I think he has an interest to exaggerate the scope and breadth of his power. So that's, I don't think it minimizes that danger to really say, look, we've had a wealth of public information about this. We've had a public trial where all of this came forward, and we saw what this military deployment looked like on the ground. And here's what it looked like. They weren't fighting crime. They were standing by federal buildings, standing by federal personnel. They detained people twice in a number of months. This is what it looks like. And we need to very sharply distinguish what Trump says he's doing and the actual real salient constraints on his power.
Sure. Now, one last thing before we move on to the really great news. This is why it was the best of times yesterday in the courts. The person I was referring to, the person who was the pardon for war crimes, his name is Eddie Gallagher, and he was a Navy SEAL. And the reason I want to share this is because this is the Hegseth side of the coin. So I think you should have up on your screen an article from 2019. And this is about Eddie Gallagher. And by the way, Pete Hegseth played a role in encouraging Donald Trump to pardon him. So this is the headline: Navy SEAL pardoned of war crimes by Trump, described by colleagues as freaking evil. Eddie Gallagher was okay with killing anything that moved. And this is what Iraq veterans told investigators in testimony that the New York Times reported. I'm sorry to be so explicit in the morning, but I need you to know what, not you specifically, Adam, but everyone listening, when he says not following the rules of engagement, this is what Hegseth is talking about. So as reported out by the Times, it said Gallagher was convicted in July of posing with the dead body of a teenage Islamic State captive he had just killed with his hunting knife. Thoughts?
Yeah. It's one thing that was interesting. I remember reading reporting about Pete Hegseth. Actually, his trajectory, he used to be, as I understand it, someone who very much believed in the rules of engagement. To see this descent from someone who would try to impose some discipline in his unit to someone who said, let's throw all the rules of engagement out the window, apologia for war crimes, and defining them out of existence, making it harder for people to anonymously report discipline, to report really concerning behavior, whether it's rape, whether it's a war crime, to say, okay, well, if you want to do that, put it in your name, and see how much you trust your chain of command not to retaliate against you. I think it's a remarkable trajectory, and it's a chilling one.
Thank you. Now, relatedly, but on the sort of good news side, as we were all reeling yesterday around midday, we got an incredible ruling. I'm going to pull this up onto the stage. Can you tell me what we are looking at, Adam?
You are looking, everyone who's watching this show is looking at the very top of a 161-page ruling in the case of AAUP versus the Trump administration. This is the case where a federal judge found that the Trump administration violated the First Amendment rights of student protesters by targeting them for deportation. If you can leave that on the screen.
I'll put it back up. I was going to bring the full case, but it's easier for us to see this. Okay,
absolutely.
go ahead.
So I want to read that. Trump has pardons and tanks. What do you have? That's a note that Judge William Young, a Reagan appointee, had received in his chambers this past June. And he addresses this entire ruling to the letter writer. And
explain what that means. I mean, wow. I think when someone dropped a postcard at the courthouse in June, the judge has had that since June. This decision came down September 30th. What is this question? Trump has pardons and tanks. What do you have? Because I don't see it as a threat. I see it as imploring. And what is this person imploring about?
It's interesting. Only one person knows what's in that person's mind. I think, there's also the how many battalions does a pope have aspect to that, right? I mean,
so it's about the rule of law, right? It's basically saying,
absolutely.
Good luck, judges, because if you don't have an army, Trump will stomp all over you. That's kind of what he's saying, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, look, it could be read in that light. It can also be read in the light of the fact that dozens, if not hundreds of threats have poured into federal judges in recent months, particularly judges who've ruled against Trump. It could be read as a taunt. It could be read as, how will you step up? Sure. It is a fact that, and we're seeing judges speaking out more and more about this, about the fact that many of them are getting pizza deliveries in the name of a son of the murdered son of a federal judge. That there's a growing and alarming number of threats against federal judges, particularly judges who rule against Trump. Judge Young himself had ruled against RFK Jr. in an excoriating ruling about the cutting of NIH grants that under this kind of anti-DEI crackdown, which he called the worst case of racial discrimination that he had seen by the government in his 40-year career on the bench. So I would imagine that the letter writer might have known about those unfavorable rulings, but
Sure.
Judge Young's response to that is really
Here, I just put up
salient.
his,
Yeah.
and obviously the whole decision is a response to that. But I like this idea that it's ambiguous. It could have been a threat,
Right.
but those words also are, for the rest of us who don't see it as a threat, fear. So this was what he said at the top of the decision. Do you want to read this?
Yeah, absolutely. Dear Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Anonymous, alone I have nothing but my sense of duty. Together, we, the people of the United States, you and me, have our magnificent Constitution. Here's how that works out in a specific case. And
Are you
so
still
as-
crying? Because I'm getting chills when you read that out loud, Adam. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, it's a stirring thing, and it's interesting. He ends the ruling both with a continuation of that response, that the ruling itself is styled in this epistolary fashion as a response to the heckler, if you have it. There's a caption right underneath it, and he explains why he has found the targeting of student protesters a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. He
Sorry, I'm going
summarizes.
fast through this to get to
Yeah.
the bottom of the decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you want me to just go up one page?
Sure. I mean, there's that we can go to the end of the letter, if you'd like, where he explains what he did. You can zoom in.
What
But
page is this on? I'm trying to.
you're on the correct page. Said, I hope you
Okay.
found this helpful. Thanks for writing. It shows you care. You should. Sincerely and respectfully, Bill Young. P.S. Next time you're in Boston, the postmark on the card is from the Philadelphia area. Step in the courthouse and watch your fellow citizens sitting as jurors reach out for justice. It is here and in the courthouse, is just like this one, both state and federal, spread throughout the land, that our Constitution is most vibrantly alive. For it is well said that, quote, where a jury sits, there burns the lamp of liberty. So that's at the very end of the ruling. So the entire ruling is, in a sense, a response to this heckler at his chambers. But within that, he
Yes, tell
summarizes.
us what's within. So let me back up, because you and I know it well. Tell me exactly, just in a nutshell. Let me just do the nutshell, and then you can tell me the things you love. This was a decision brought by the American Association of University Professors and the chapter at Harvard and some other folks against Rubio and the Trump administration. Related to what? What were they related to their First Amendment rights being infringed, right? This is related back to, if this is correct, a graduate student named Oster from MIT, who was pulled off the streets of Boston by these masked ICE agents or federal agents, and in violation, targeted because of nothing she had, and she was here legally, nothing she had done, no crime, but that she had been publishing op-eds condemning the way universities were cracking down on pro-Palestinian activists. So this was a case suing, saying the government had violated First Amendment rights. Am I getting this generally right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's not only about Ramesa Öztürk. It's about Mahmoud Khalil. It's about Mohsen
At
Madawi.
Columbia.
It's about
Right.
Dr. Badar
The Harvard-
Khansouri.
So there's
there-
all these people, right? There's all
Right.
these people impacted. I'm using her as an example, like you said. This
Absolutely.
is about people who are targeted by the U.S. government because of their speech. And I know it's 161 glorious pages, but do they win?
They win now, but
But what do they win? This is the trick.
So they win on the findings of fact. So what the judge has released is his findings of fact and rulings of law, because he held a 9-day bench trial. He heard evidence, he heard testimony. We have not reached the phase, what's known as a remedy phase, where the judge will decide what he is empowered by the law and Constitution to do about it, to order the government to have a remedy for the students who either were retaliated against for their speech or who were chilled by the very fact that their peers are being descended upon by masked ICE agents and hustled across the country and forced to fight long legal battles, expensive legal battles, away from their studies. This is the crux of the ruling. The ruling goes into the law and the facts as he understood it following that 9-day trial. But what will come of it, what the punishment for the government will be, is set aside for another day. But I wanted to,
just before you get to the punishments usually come in the form of, like you're saying, an injunction, telling that the government has to change its behavior, or maybe money damages. Okay, so continue and tell me what you loved about this decision.
Well, it's a really interesting decision because he won. He holds nothing back. Yesterday, there was I live in New York City, and in 26 Federal Plaza, that's an immigration court, very close to the federal courthouses, state courthouses. It's a federal building. The immigration court is essentially the executive branch. But over the course of several months, there's been a trend where, and this has been happening across the country as well, where ICE agents have been wearing masks, have been going to where immigrants are cooperating and attending their court hearings, doing the right thing. And they are arresting immigrants at these hearings. Now, this has generated a lot of protests. There have been elected officials, including Brad Lander, who have been—
who's the controller of New York, right?
Yes, basically New York City's top accountant. He was arrested there multiple times for observing those proceedings. And this connects to what we've been discussing, because just yesterday, the masked ICE agents assaulted journalists who were just sitting in the hallway. Two of them went in the elevator. They shoved a couple of the journalists, and the journalists they shoved were hurled so violently into another journalist, a Turkish journalist, that journalist was rendered semi-conscious and sent to the hospital. Now, there was a part of this ruling that talked about the masking.
I'm going to pull that up for you right now. I knew you'd get to that. Okay, here we go. I'm pulling up the page of this ruling dealing with masking, and let me make it a full page for the folks who want to see it. This is on page 98, and you can, obviously, you have your notes too.
And so it was just so striking to me that on that day, this is something that the entire journalistic community in New York City is, of course, shocked about, up in arms about. It's harrowing to see an assault on journalists by government employees, masked government employees, and to see one journalist actually hustled off to the hospital because of that assault. And it fell on the day that Judge William Young, a Reagan appointee, released these words, quote, "ICE goes masked for a single reason: to terrorize Americans into quiescence. Small wonder ICE often seems to need our respected military to guard them as they go about implementing our immigration laws. It should be noted that our troops do not ordinarily wear masks. Can you imagine a masked Marine? It is a matter of honor, and honor still matters. To us, masks are associated with cowardly desperados and the despised Ku Klux Klan. In all our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked, secret police." And that's the end of the passage that I'm reading. But it should be noted that this assault on journalists by masked ICE agents at 26 Federal Plaza, that immigration court in Lower Manhattan, fell a week after, and I'm sure many of the viewers saw the viral video of a ICE agent essentially tackling the wife of an immigrant who was arrested at a court hearing. So this is a pattern of behavior. That particular agent was taken off duty, and then after some opposition to that officer being disciplined from MAGA supporters, he's been reinstated. So I think the masked ICE agents feel a very real, a natural sense of impunity over this. So to that, this ruling, now, how did this get into the ruling about student protesters? Well, you mentioned Rumeysa Öztürk.
And can I stop you for 1 second? Because I do want you to talk about that. I was able to just pull up a screenshot, which is easy to read, of this language. And the part that hits me the hardest is this part, that last part you read. To us, masks are associated with cowardly desperados and the despised Ku Klux Klan. In our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked, secret police. That language, armed, masked, secret police. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has been pushing back. Why isn't this louder? To me, this is what makes this judge's statement. I mean, he is, oops, I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to mute this for 1 second.
No worries. Well, I'll say,
I'm sorry. Let me just say, for some reason, that my phone was going on. Okay. So this is so powerful. And he is a judge, not a politician. He's talking about something. So tell me how this makes it into the decision, like you were saying.
Rumeysa Öztürk was arrested by masked agents. And while her arrest was being recorded, there was a voice heard saying, "Why are you hiding your faces?" And the judge responds to the voice saying that as with the words, "Fair question." That's a fair question. And he asked during the trial, he said, I remember watching it, they have remote streaming of their trials in the District of Massachusetts. And he said, I am not used to seeing masked agents. And, he's been on the bench for 40 years. This isn't
Reagan appointee.
Reagan appointee. As a matter of fact, he ends his decision with a quote by Ronald Reagan, not as president, but as a governor in California. And this is where, you showed that the title, the headline of my article was that the judge sounds the alarm. And there's no other way to put it, because you have this, there's what's extraordinary about this ruling. After he's issued the decision, he has about a 13 page section called Justice in the Trump Era, where he just riffs on what he describes as the bullying and the attacks on the rule of law. And he quotes Reagan saying in 1967, quote, "Freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people." And he responds to that quote from Reagan with this. I first heard these words of President Reagan's back in 2007 when my son quoted them in a Law Day celebration speech at Norfolk Superior Court. I was deeply moved and hold these words before me as I discharge judicial duties. As I read and reread the record in this case, listened widely and reflected extensively, I've come to believe that President Trump truly understands and appreciates the full import of President Reagan's inspiring message. Yet I fear he has drawn from it a darker, more cynical message. I fear President Trump believes the American people are so divided that today they will not stand up, fight for, and defend our most precious constitutional values so long as they are lulled into thinking their own personal interests are not affected. And he ends the ruling with these words. Is he correct? And so that, look, this ruling has inspired a lot of commentary for various reasons. There are people who think, judge, stay in your lane. You are not a political pundit. Like he has faced criticism for sounding the alarm, as it were. And then there are others who say, look, this is an emergency moment. He is sounding the alarm because things are under attack, because this case even demonstrates.
Let me just
that-
say this. This is making me on fire. I'll let you go. I know you were mid-sentence that but I want to say there's nothing illegal about a judge writing in this way. There might be a norm against it. And yeah, so there are people who are like, you didn't cross that T, you didn't dot that I about this judge, when our democracy is on fire and our president and the Secretary of Defense is encouraging war crimes and violating this law and that law, and people are turning their sights on this judge who is saying, get it together, American people. We must stop this. And that's what they're pointing at, Adam. I mean,
right. And look, I mean, this isn't entirely it's not something that is unrelated. It's not a non sequitur. This is about, and if you read that section where he's commenting on justice in the Trump era, he connects what is happening to these student protesters to the attacks on law firms, to the attacks on the media, the news media, the common thread is attacks on the First Amendment, the attacks on speech, the attacks on freedom itself. And this is one line that I found very salient, where he was talking about the one question, a central question that he answered in this case is, do non-citizens enjoy First Amendment rights? Are there free speech rights, or can they be deported for any reason whatsoever? And after asking that question, whether they have the same free speech rights as the rest of us, he answers unequivocally, yes, they do.
Okay, let's stop here. This is huge. People were saying, so when you say non-citizens, it could be someone visiting on vacation. It could be a student with some kind of visa. It could be someone who crosses the border without documentation. If you are in the United States, even if you're not a citizen, you have speech rights under the First Amendment. This is
correct.
Period.
Correct.
That's what the judge says. Okay.
And he says, when asking that question and taking on the government's idea that that non-citizens are here by our grace, and that we don't need any explanation. If we want to deport them, we can do so. He responds, we are not, and we must not become a nation that imprisons and deports people because we are afraid of what they have to tell us. Because let's go to the commonalities of all of these cases. I mentioned Mahmoud Khalil. I mentioned Rumeysa Öztürk, Dr. Suri, and others. They are not accused of committing any or supporting any violent acts. The government has insinuated that they are pro-Hamas. They have not put forward any evidence to that effect. They went after Rumeysa Öztürk because she wrote a op-ed that is critical of Israel, the war in Gaza, and the university administration in her school. All ideas that she is entitled to have, regardless of what people think of them. We talk a lot about free speech in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, and we ought to. That violence is, there's an expression, murder is the ultimate form of censorship, that traces back to George Bernard Shaw. Assassination is the extreme form of censorship, George Bernard Shaw said.
I love Shaw.
Yeah. But if we care about censorship, then you ought to care about this case. Whatever you think about the opinions of any of the people whose free speech rights are being opposed by the state through imprisonment, through being hustled out of jurisdictions to avoid a court taking action to vindicate their rights. So that is.
And when we link this together, Adam, I mean, think about if Donald Trump is, and Pam Bondi, we've heard it, calling anyone an enemy within, even U.S. citizens, if they oppose Donald Trump. Bondi said something like that today. That,
right.
That is, you and I don't want to say make our living, but live and breathe expression, right? I love to follow the news. I teach law. You are an incredible, you have like an honorary law degree at this point. You write, you speak, you express yourself well. The idea that the First Amendment, that our speech rights are in jeopardy is an existential threat. I mean,
Right.
we have no opportunity to exist, to complain, to even discuss overturning a tyrannical regime. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now we have, Adam, before we get to this last part of the show that I call Crazy Town, what haven't we talked about today that you would like to discuss about this case or about the shutdown? Anything on your mind?
I mean, I think we captured a really broad outline of things that are going on. Just to your point a little bit earlier, Jen, there was a recent declaration of Antifa is a domestic terror organization on the free speech spectrum here. That is, folks may or may not remember, Trump said that in his first term and nothing happened of it. Why did nothing happen of it? Because there is no such thing in the United States of America as a domestic terrorist organization. It's not a law on the books. It doesn't exist. Trump says it to try to intimidate people who he categorizes on one part of the political spectrum. And the reason why we don't have a domestic terror organization statute is because we value the First Amendment. We value freedom of association. That, yes, courts can impose certain penalties that are enhancements, sentencing enhancements for crimes that are actually related to violence and domestic terrorism. But to say that you're going to go after a group of people who you disfavor and call domestic terrorists, and, it starts on the bogus proposition that anti-fascist ideology is an organization, that the headquarters of Antifa somewhere in the middle America exists. No, that's not a thing. Antifa is not an organization, and domestic terrorism organizations do not exist. It goes to what I was saying earlier and kind of connecting a common thread in a lot of the topics we've been talking about, that there is this attempt to overstate his power, his ability to try to exaggerate the power that he holds, his ability to silence, in the hopes that people will prematurely abdicate that ability, prematurely silence themselves, that they'll give up, like so many of the most powerful folks in our society, whether they're major media corporations that have settled easily winnable lawsuits, whether they are major law firms who are best positioned to know what nonsense the executive orders were, how easily beatable those executive orders were, and said, oh, okay, I'll give you a few $100 million worth of pro bono services. It's the most powerful people who are setting this horrendous example of prematurely abdicating their rights when Trump exaggerates the power that he holds. And that's why I find it so important, even as we don't play down the threat of authoritarianism, to actually point out accurately what's going on. That when Trump says that so-and-so is a domestic terrorist organization, to point to the fact that he said this during his first term, nothing happened, because he does not have that power. That it calls for, that form of fact-checking, even under this very severe circumstance, still matters. It's still very important.
Thank you for striking that balance from the beginning of the conversation. It's hard to do, and it's so important. Now, Adam, there's something I do at the end of my show. It's called Crazy Town. But before I do that, and I've been putting it up, Deb Brumberger, one of our moderators, has been feeding to the chat where people can find you. But where can people find your work?
Thank you very much. You can find my work at www.allrisenews.com. All Rise News is a many play on words. I covered the courts for a while, so all rise for the jury, all rise for the judge. But it's also about rising as a member of society who is engaged and recognizes the levers of power that we hold. So that's a website you can find. We are based on Substack. We're getting toward 23,000 subscribers. If you subscribe, right? Yeah.
Nice.
So if you subscribe, you'll get my journalism straight to your inbox. And if you become a paid subscriber, that is a way to keep my journalism sustained. Next week, I'll be covering multiple court hearings, the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the case of James Comey. That requires the support of readers and viewers to allow me to, I'm not supported by a major corporation. This is based on my media startup that I'm hoping to build into a broader newsroom. So that is that's the ambition. And
that's amazing. And where else?
And also, you can find me on social media, mostly under the handles Klasfeld Reports on both Blue Sky and on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube. I have a show on the Midas Touch Network's Legal AF, on the All Rise News playlist. And we're just getting started. I went independent all of 5 months ago. All Rise News just passed its 5-month anniversary. We're growing constantly, and I'm very happy and proud about what I've been able to cover as an independent journalist, sustained by readers and supporters and good friends who get me on their program. So thank you very much, Jen.
Well, thank you. I mean, you youngsters give me hope for the future. Okay, I'm going to play the Crazy Town music, and you'll see what happens next, Adam. I do a little dancing. You don't have to. It's really easy.
I'm recovering from an injury, so my dancing.
It's all right. It's all right. So what I'm going to show you now is just a clip. Now, this is one little moment from yesterday's assembly of the hundreds of generals when Donald Trump did his most Donald Trump thing he could do, which is express a bunch of weird grievances and talk about himself in a way that, in part, help to encourage J.B. Pritzker and others to ask the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment. I'm more in favor, my friends, of impeachment and removal. It's faster, it's easier, and more permanent. But let's listen to how crazy Donald Trump is here.
Looked at him falling downstairs every day. Every day the guy's falling downstairs. He said, "It's not our president. We can't have it." I'm very careful, when I walk downstairs, like I'm on stairs, like these stairs, I walk very slowly. Nobody has to set a record. Just try not to fall, because it doesn't work out well. A few of our presidents have fallen, and it became a part of their legacy. We don't want that. You walk nice and easy. You don't have to set any record. Be cool. Be cool when you walk down, but don't bop down the stairs. So one thing with
thoughts.
I think I'm just going to let that clip speak on its own. And plus, I will say, if I cannot top the great Lawrence O'Donnell's commentary on the stair thing, I'm going to leave it at that. He spoke he gave a really great opening monologue about that last night. I encourage people to watch that one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me. I wish you an easy fast, everybody, if that's you, Adam, or anyone else. And although I won't be live tomorrow morning, folks, I'm going to pre-record so you have something to watch focused on the government shutdown. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. day there is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.